Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to you all. There are so many of you joining us for this new year, a new series of community builders brought to you by Rural Aid and Bank of Ideas, and a wonderful new sponsor that I'm looking forward to telling you all about. Now, just before we get started, I'm going to ask you all to run a little test on your system, so just bear with me for a moment. Hi, Sue. How are you doing? Here we go. I'm going to pop a little test in just so you can all check your systems. If you hit that test, there we go. Hi, Shaz from Otago, Nikki from New Zealand, Sue from Charters Towers. Great to see you all. Wonderful to have you all here and great to see you all running that test at the moment. Hi, Tricia from Newcastle. Hi, Steve from Bega. Lisa from Thargomindah at Baloo. Green Bushes in WA, Gail. Jeff and Jill from Elliston in SA. Well, what a wonderful community we already have here joining us at the start of this session. I want to quickly introduce you, if I might. I should say who I am. I'm Lindsay Douglas. I'm from Rural Aid. I'll be your host. You can see I'm wearing the shirt, wrong side. I'm going to quickly introduce you to our phenomenal new sponsors for this series because we are delighted to welcome them on board. So this is Holdmark, our new sponsors, helping us at Rural Aid to support small towns in rural and remote Australia in developing wonderful communities and strong small communities in the face of all sorts of challenges that come up when we live in our small town. Santa Fe, New Mexico. Brian, welcome along. Great to see you here. Holdmark are really famous in Sydney, where I'm based at the moment, for what they've done to the urban landscapes here, to quality living, working and playing environments. They're all about community, and they've got some award-winning developments all over this beautiful city that I am lucky to live in. So I want to thank them and welcome them on board as the sponsor of this series. Now, I'm delighted to tell you that Peter Kenyon, who many of you will know, has got 8 extraordinary episodes coming up for you here as part of this series. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, most of you will see that we've got the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. And thank you to all of you who have been signing in and saying hello. And hello to all of you. It's great to have you on board. We hope that you get some really useful information today and a ton of inspiration. I'm going to ask you to do something a bit tricky. If you look down the bottom where the little chat box is where you type in and talk, I'm going to ask you if it's your first time joining us here at the Community Builders webinar series, I want you to give me an emoji in the little emoji box. It's a smiley face. But if you're a returning community builder, give me a thumbs up. I want to see what sort of mix we have going on here today. Good to see you, Alice, Susie. I've got tears coming through, so I don't know what I've done there, but lovely to have you all on. Look, for those of you joining us for the first time, we welcome you warmly on behalf of Rural Aid, and it's so great to see your interest in small towns in rural and remote Australia and beyond because, as you notice, we have a focus on connecting rural Australia because there's great stories, there's similar challenges, but we've also got some international guests here. So in order to get us all sort of connecting and meeting each other, I wondered if I could get you all to, and a couple of you have already done it, but pop the town name and state and or country you're coming from and one key reason we should come and visit your area. Is it an event? Is it an historic icon? Is it something magnificent that you won't find anywhere else in the world? Tell us your town name, your state and your country, and one reason to come and visit your area. There's no reason once we all start travelling again that we can't use this as a bit of travel inspiration too. Well, this new series that we are so delighted to bring back to you is focused on small town reinventions, and really that is looking at the successful tales of creativity, collaboration and use of community assets. And in doing so, we're addressing things that we all face, like population decline, impact of drought, particularly here in Australia, changes that happen to industry and infrastructure and other challenges that tend to destabilise the fabric and economic viability of our small towns. And of course, we don't want to see those small towns die, we want to see them prosper. So we look here for proactive solutions and inspiration for the people who get stuff done in those towns. And we call those people the community builders. And every single one of you that's joining us right now is a community builder. So welcome to the community. Now, I've got the little settings here. If you're having any troubles, just let me know and I'll sort you out if you're having any tech issues along the way. That is just par for the course in rural Australia tech challenges. So I'm totally unflapped by them. But of course, before we get underway today, we wish to acknowledge the traditional owners Australia-wide for their continuous connection to the land. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, this presentation is being recorded, so don't worry about the need to get every note down and keep up with it all. We record it, we get the video out to everyone, we write a case study, and of course, we share a bunch of stuff in our Facebook group too. I'll try and share the link for that in a moment with you. Now, speaking of community builders, we were saddened this week to hear of the passing of a brilliant community builder, this woman, Lillian Brady. She was many things. She was the longest serving female mayor in New South Wales. She passed at the age of 90. She'll be remembered as a legend in that community and beyond. She was a wonderful leader. Now, she moved to Cockburn around the 1960s and by all accounts, she planned to stay there for just a year. But like many people that come into our communities and change them, she just fell in love with the community and she stayed. She was recently awarded an OAM and had been mayor of that outback mining town in the west of the state that I'm in right now for some 23 years. She was a local councillor, though, for almost 40 years. She was such a fighter for her community. She had wonderful successes in improving it. And one of the initiatives that is attributed to her genius and her passion for the area was a great event in 2019, which was Australia's first, not gay Mardi Gras, grey Mardi Gras. And that was to celebrate seniors and it brought great tourism to the town. So what I'm going to do now, because there's this brilliant piece, there's so much media about it because she was an icon well outside of her community. I'm going to pop a little link in here to the ABC video of her. It's well worth watching if you get 5 minutes later this afternoon. I've just sent that link to all of you now. And that's click on that and just have it on your screen and go to it later because she's certainly worth knowing more about. She will inspire you to do more in your communities, and lovely to see you all sharing what to do in your towns and why to join there. Now, these webinars, if you haven't joined us before, have become a critical opportunity to connect and exchange ideas and information and broaden the collective knowledge base in rural Australia. And another way that we're doing that is via our Facebook group. Now, these are not just for people that are on local councils or, and mind my eyesight going off, I'm just adding a link while I'm chatting away to you. They're not just for people who are in formal community building positions. They're for anyone who's on any community group or who cares about how their community is going. A lot of primary producers join us on here. If you're a farmer, give us a shout out. And you are so welcome to join that group because Peter Kenyon and the team at Rural Aid share all sorts of great resources, case studies, ways to get things done, and there's a lot going on in that Facebook group. So please do join us. Also, if there's someone else that you think should join into these webinars, please just share the link with them. The link that you've joined with for this particular edition is the same link that we use for the whole 8 episodes of this series. So we would love you to share that around with people that you think would benefit from hearing about how to make our small towns even more robust and prosperous. So this whole series is about the reinvention of our small towns. And I'm sorry about that small graphic glitch that I've got on the screen at the moment, but it has a picture of our speakers today. Never mind, you'll see them in a moment anyway. We're going to be talking about the reinvention of small towns through Indigenous culture and heritage, through murals and public art, through ignoring remoteness, through local power initiatives and country shows and all sorts of things. But today's focus is on positive first impressions. And we're heading to a town today that virtually has to make an impression, a big first impression, because it's in a shire that covers nearly 100,000 square kilometres, which is huge. It's home to less than 800 people. And the town that we're going to specifically today is some 7.5 hours from the other town in the Shire. So it has a whole bunch of reasons it has to make an extraordinary first impression. Now, for those of you who haven't been to these webinars before, I'm about to introduce you to a wonderful community building specialist who, in each of these editions, comes to us with a bunch of examples on the topic of the day. And that expert is the incomparable Peter Kenyon of Bank of Ideas, who has assisted over 2,000 communities over 35 years on delivering programs and long-lasting improvements to precious small communities. Is there anyone more passionate about small communities? If there is, I haven't met them. Peter, welcome back. And I can't wait to find out where you're going to take us all today.
Right. Great, Lindsay, and look, welcome to everyone. It's great to see people from Southern California, great to see people from New Mexico in the US, great to see a couple of people from Otago. My grandmother comes from Central Otago, so always great to see people from that part of the world and people from all over Australia. As Lindsay said, I'm a small town enthusiast. I love our small towns. I believe we should be doing everything to build this mosaic of towns across the bush. And I really am committed that through this series, we might be able to share great stories of what people are doing. And today the theme is very much about the importance of kind of like first impressions. And to me, there are two truisms that we've got to focus on. One is you don't get a second chance at a first impression. And secondly, sadly, the state of often our main street is a reflection of the pride and confidence of that community. And so to me, first impressions matter. And so it's great to have a whole session on that. And before we go to that great town of Norseman and hear their story, what I'm really keen to share with you is a bit of a smorgasbord of kind of like what's actually happening around the country under this theme. And I want to kick off with one community that's really committed itself. In fact, you know what? They've just spent $13 million upgrading their main street. It's this place called Margaret River. It kind of like is the most visited place in WA outside of the metropolitan area. Last year, 9% of all kind of like visitors before COVID that came were from the eastern states or from overseas. It's by far our most important tourism region. And yet, this was the main street. And back there in 2011, the council began to say, you know what, the main street doesn't really help our brand of being this great wine and tourism place, and we need to do something about it. They estimated at that time about 31% of the income that came into the town came through the main street. But if they could lift it, if they could do something to make that a much more appealing main street, they reckon they could actually lift that by about 20%. They believed, in fact, that they could actually generate about an additional $27 million into that local economy. They believed that by doing something with the main street, their estimates were that they could actually create about 200 more jobs full-time and another 103 part-time jobs because of that improvement. And so they've engaged in looking at what it is that they could do to kind of like transform that main street. And this was the initial kind of like image that went out, and they started gathering people together to start talking about it. And I suppose what I love is the process they went through. It was an attempt to engage their wider community in terms of idea kind of like generation. They brought people together for sessions. They engaged their local artist community in starting to look at designs and starting to do things. And I love that thing about tapping into the wisdom of the locals. Wisdom of locals, much more important than the knowledge of the expert. And so they engaged in these type of activities. Now, this guy, Peter, was the project manager, regularly ran sessions in the local pubs where people who had ideas could come together. And above all, they used some very simple information that they could actually get the message out about trying to tap into people's ideas. They started with their roundabouts. They started with a bypass, realizing getting the trucks out of that main street was all part of it and getting in kind of like that start. And then, you know, what I really loved was the fact that they started with kind of like looking at developing a storyline for their street. They invited locals to share photos, share stories about that main street and what's gone on, and how do we build that kind of like into their main street. And then the process began, and it wasn't without problems. It stirred a lot of traders because this went on for a long time. You can imagine the disruption that went on and how that really affected businesses. And I'm sure the council learned a lot from that, how and how not to kind of like do those things. But, you know, again, this process began and the community started to build. And you know what? They instigated, for example, a thing I thought was neat, and that was just Main Street activation grants. You got a good idea that could activate it, particularly during this rebuilding time when things are abnormal, and they provided these $1,000 grants, and a whole pile of things actually happened during that particular time. What I love is the fact that it's only recently been opened. It kind of like took all that time, but boy, the main street really is starting to look great. But one of the things I love is the way that local businesses have engaged. And this is one of my favorite. I just love this kind of like initiative by one of those businesses in terms of putting art form into the main street. Now, the other end of the spectrum, as you head toward Mount Augustus, is this, again, massive shire. And within it, this is the Shire of Upper kind of like Gascoyne. And the capital of Upper Gascoyne, population kind of like 46 people, other extreme from Margaret River. Exactly realise you don't get a second chance at first impressions. People have travelled through a lot, and boy, what they needed to do. This population of 46 said, you know what, we need to turn our little town site into an oasis. And the way that they've greened that, the way that they have actually engaged in planting a whole pile of water-resistant plants, wildflowers. They found a couple of locals are into propagation, engaged them, the way they brought stuff out and started to put stuff into their main streets. And can I say, this town has just absolutely created an amazing image. As you drive in, it just has such wow factor. Such a wow factor that the amazing program we have here, the Tidy Hounds program that runs every year, awarded this town probably the best appearance town this year in the Tidy Towns Award. And boy, it was well deserved. One thing I love is the way they've used public art. Have a look at this amazing bit of public art, which is their RSL monument, taking from the pastoralist on his horse to kind of like the charge of the Light Brigade. And again, that's just part of what they've actually done. Amazing story. Don't miss kind of like Gascoyne Junction, about 2 hours out of Carnarvon up there in the Gascoyne region. An amazing community who've really shown you need to do something about your impressions, and in the process win the state award for kind of like the best. You know, through these communities, what I've learned are 6 key lessons that I want to quickly share with you. And the first is you've got to have fresh eyes. You know, we become town entrance blind. We become main street blind. We become so used to what's there, we can drive past things and not even notice. And I think one of the first things I've learned about community building, it's not about new landscapes. It's about having fresh eyes about what you've actually got. You know, we can't afford to kind of like just allow these type of scenes to kind of like appear. What do they tell the visitor? This town is tired. This town is dying. You know, you can't afford to kind of like have this type of stuff up. And then the type of entrances. You know, who can give a damn that you were the Tidy Towns winner back in 1986 or in 2001? What people are saying is, well, what's happened in the last 20 years? What's important is use that town entrance to promote, wow, we are, as the rest of that sign in Richmond does, one of the best kind of like dinosaur places you'll ever go to. You know, what is really interesting about Dorrigo is they have the largest railway collection anywhere in the Southern Hemisphere. Being kind of like your Tidy Towns winner back in 1986 ain't really likely to get people to want to stop and get out of their car and rush around and spend money. So first impressions, signage, imagery, how tired things are just kind of like so important about what it is. Lesson 2, you know, focus on people and street life, not cars. I love that quote. You know, design for people and you'll attract people, design for vehicles and you attract vehicles. I know parking's important, but much more important is to actually create an environment, particularly in that main street, that's really about people and about street life. You know, what people love seeing is people. And again, how do we encourage people? I always remember my mate, the mayor of Christchurch, back Vicky Buck, years ago, back when Christchurch was reinventing itself in the early 1990s. You know, you actually got a rebate if you moved your kind of like business out onto the pavement. Today, we want to slug people, kind of like a tax. Really, it is about getting that business, getting it out on the pavement, getting kind of like that seating, getting creative seating, kind of like doing anything that gets people, not cars, into the kind of like the main street. And again, that's about music. That's about those pop-up events that we need to kind of like create that calendar as that we actually have within our town. I love kind of like spending, if I've got a week to spare, where I want to be, it's a place called Tuscany in Italy. And what I love about Tuscany is you wander into these villages in Tuscany and all the traders are actually out on the street. They're sitting there in the chair. They're interacting. They're not behind the counter in the shop. They're out there where the customer, the potential customer is. And so are their wares. And again, when are we going to learn that we've just got to get people out there? We've got to create streets. And again, I know that's about shade, and some of our towns are in some fairly hot places, but it is about making that street life come alive. I love this one out of the little place in Bassendean in WA, where they've kind of like painted on one of the walls this amazing mural to encourage you to be dog friendly, and kind of like done that and so on. And again, these are the little things that make our kind of like main street kind of like unique and different. The third lesson is invest in green spaces, trees and flowers, and lots of them. I always love going into Tamworth, for example, and you kind of like see kind of like scenes like this. I love going into that town of Coolin in WA in the wheat belt, hot old place. But you know what? They've came up with this scheme to capture the winter rains in this large storage and then to pump it back during the summer months into wildflowers and greenery. So all year you drive into this little town called Coolin and immediately there's that wow factor. Wow, this main street looks good. And boy, you then want to get out of your car and start spending on local products and services. And again, first impressions are just so important. You want to see what a wheat belt town can do, go to Coolin. Or, Bathurst, I just love again what they've done with kind of like trees and so on. And I love the fact that people, we've got these trees, bougainvilleas and jacarandas, things that actually bring those flowers. What I love about Richmond is just the way they've used jacarandas. Absolutely stunning in terms of that. And boy, it does have kind of like an impact and so on. In France, they have an amazing scheme there where they have what are called a competition to be one of the 20 most beautiful villages of France. And it's a marketing thing, and boy, has it kind of like helped whoever gets that award annually really benefits. And I love this particular place called Yves. And when you go there, yes, it is the heritage that's on show, and this is what kind of like makes lots of those villages. But every single one of them, it's also about colour. It's also about what they do with flowers. And geraniums is one of the main things they actually use. I just love the way that you just kind of like use it. And many of our towns have got stunning colourful wildflowers and things like that we could kind of like start using a lot more. But you know what? Trees really matter. Flowers really matter. Green spaces really matter. And I know water is always a challenge, but let's become creative about how we do that and do that in kind of like creative ways. I love in Tamworth, again, as I said, I just love kind of like the trees that kind of like go on there and what's actually there. It really does make it. And again, I just love the fact we've got to keep that and we've just got to keep adding to it. It does make a difference. Lesson number 4, I always say that one of the key skills any community builder needs is to be a storyteller. And again, our main streets have got to be kind of like telling our story. That's what gives us. We've got to know our story and we've got to begin to kind of like tell that story in the main street. And boy, we've got so much that we can actually share. I love going to Euroa where, one of the things they've got is they've got 3 VC winners come out of that tiny little town. And the way that they've actually, A, promote that as an attraction as you're driving along the highway, but B, then have developed up this VC kind of like memorial park. And boy, the way that they've used signage, that park, the way they've used public art, absolutely amazing. I love being in Halls Creek and the way that they've used things like telling the story that really, you know what, the Flying Doctor service has its origins in this Kimberley town, and the story behind that and the role that Jimmy Darcy played in that whole story. But again, the way that they've used kind of like public art to kind of like capture that story. And again, all of our towns have stories. And how are we capturing it? How are we using kind of like old photos? How are we using our rubbish bins kind of like more creatively? I love going into Sunbury to be reminded that this is where the ashes were created. What better story to kind of like put onto the town entrance, and the way that that kind of like immediately thinks, wow, this is an interesting place. I need to spend time there. I love the work of Peter Solness. If you haven't seen that, I really recommend you have a look at his photography work and the way he used light photography. And I love, for example, what he did in that New South Wales town of Hill End, where he took old historic photos and reproduced them at night and made that kind of like come alive. And again, the way that lighting has kind of like creatively kind of like done it. And we've got to make our main streets come alive at night. I love now going into Longreach up there in Western Queensland and seeing how they've used lights and wire in the main street to have all of these lights coming on in the evening, these solar lights. And boy, lighting makes a difference. But look at the work of Peter Solness. Isn't it absolutely stunning how what he's simply done is taken a heritage site and flicked onto it, kind of like photos and so on. And again, we don't need to be a boring town. We can be quite exciting because every one of us has got kind of like exciting stories about how we can actually do things. Lesson number 5, really stir curiosity through creativity. The suburb of Ravenswood in Launceston and Tassie, the way that the whole community created their town entrance sign. It's a stunning sign as you drive into that kind of like neighbourhood these days. And again, how do we do it? I love the story of Hundavisa and the toilets in Kawakawa. I'm sure our New Zealand members on today's webinar will know all about Kawakawa. This is where the famous Austrian architect basically discovered that New Zealand was the other country he wanted to spend part of his life. And he bought a farm there just out of this little town in the North Island called Kawakawa up there in the Bay of Islands. And back there in 1998, he kind of like asked a few of the locals, what can I do? And this world-famous Austrian architect has done all this stunning architecture in Vienna and whatever. And they replied and said, we'd love a new toilet block. Well, to give him credit, he designed it using his ultimate kind of like brand, which was about, living stuff on the roof, mosaics, kind of like the way he's done all of that mosaic. And he's created what I think is probably the world's most famous toilet block. And boy, is it stunning. On average, and this is pre-COVID, but 1.5 million visitors go to Kawakawa. And I tell you, what is it that draws them there? The toilet in the main street. Not any toilet, the most exciting. And again, I think Lindsay's flicked up. If you haven't seen that story, flick onto that YouTube that Lindsay's just given you. It really will inspire you. And you know what? Toilets, in fact, happen to be the number one reason why people stop. And so, you know what? To have the best toilet block in your main street is the best promotion you can do for your businesses. You want people into your shops, put the best toilet block you've ever seen. But don't put it out of town. Don't put it on the town boundary. People don't necessarily stop twice. Put it into your main street. Simple lesson that we've learnt. It's amazing. And to see what's happened in the rest of the town where they've taken that art form and started to extend it down the main street. Boy, that town is amazing. Before you die, you've got to see Kawakawa there in New Zealand. And Winton, so much I love about Winton. Have a look at their entry signage advertising their shops in the town, the best I've seen in the country. You want to look at creative advertising of businesses, that's a town that's got it right. But they've done other things. Their musical fence, where you can go and play a fence and play all these instruments. Again, the way they've kind of like added to kind of like wanting to kind of like you to kind of like stop and become part of the scene in Winton. Amazing. And I love the big footy there in Ungari, commemorating the Daniher family. I mean, your rugby people won't have a clue what we're talking about, but, the Daniher family have been famous in Australian rules footy and have contributed so much. And this is the little town they've come from. So why not kind of like use that as part of our storyline? And, even simple signage that actually get you curious. I love these two, open and awesome. Who can resist not walking in? stuff you've never seen before. We all have that curiosity. It doesn't need to be expensive. It just needs to be creative, how we actually get people excited. This place I really love. It's a place in one of the suburbs in Seattle. I love going there, where they had all these empty shops. So what do? They painted the shops they'd love to have there. And again, people drive past and hop out of their car. They look so real. And the result is this whole neighbourhood has now actually been revitalised with real shops. But I love the fact that they've used that to kind of like do stuff. I drive into so many towns, and what I see is newspaper kind of like on the walls of empty shops. You know, what does it tell me? It tells me this town's dying. You know, we don't want that. We want the people to go, wow, this is a place I need to spend time in. And the final lesson is don't forget humour. All of us love humour, particularly us Aussies. We love humour. And it just seems to me that we do kind of like need to kind of like use it. And I just love the way, I love the butcher in Halls Creek with his kind of like amazing sign. I tell you, it doesn't turn people on, it drags people into the shop. I love that one that I kind of like, I recently saw, coffee is vital for survival. Dinosaurs didn't have coffee, and look how that turned out. I mean, you've got to laugh at it. And again, just using a bit of humour is really important. And you know what? It was kind of like 20 years ago, I first saw that sign in Barramar in South Australia about their sheepdog trial. You know what? I never, ever forget and think about whenever the word, and this town comes up, Barramar, I always think of that amazing sign, which they kind of like repainted over the years and whatever. But you know what? My memories of that place all come back to one sign, a creative, funny kind of like sign that really grabs you as you kind of like start driving into that particular town. So in closing, you know, it ain't rocket science stuff. It's about getting back to basics. And to me, there are 6 lessons that towns that have done it well have really shown us. And we're about now to hear about an amazing place, the Shire of Dundas, the little town of Norsman. Norseman happens to be that place when you come over the Nullarbor Plain. It's the first real serious WA place that you'll run into. Amazing place. Introduce the story, Lindsay.
Thanks so much, Peter, and so many great examples there of important first impressions and towns that are just nailing it. Well, we're going to hear directly from a town today that is working on precisely that first impression. And we're lucky enough to have not one, not 2, but 3 community builders joining us from the Esperance Goldfields region of Western Australia. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you the Shire of Dundas Council President Laurene Bonza, the CEO Peter Fitchat, and Pania Turner, the Manager of Community Development. Now, I'll get you guys to zoom in a little bit if you can so we can get up nice and close to you. How good's technology in the Euclid Coast? And I'll leave you to tell your story. I'll jump off, but I will be back because we invite our viewers to jump in, ask questions, and Peter and I'll bring those questions back to you throughout the session. Good luck.
Lindsay. Hello, everybody. I'm Laurene Bonza. I'm the President of the Shire of Dundas. I will look down and consult notes, which is probably not a good thing, but that's what I'm going to do. So first of all, before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge our First Nations people, who are the Nudju and Mirning people in our Shire as the traditional custodians, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So we seem to have a small slide problem, but we'll just carry on regardless. So I'd just like to give everyone an idea of where we are. So that, if everyone can see that slide, there's a yellow section on that slide down in the bottom of Western Australia. That is our whole Shire. So it extends from the South Australian border about halfway across the whole state. So we take in about 93,000 square kilometres. We are in the heart of the Great Western Woodlands, which is the largest and the healthiest remaining intact Mediterranean climate woodland on the planet. It's about the size of England, the Great Western Woodlands. There are approximately 3,000 species of flowering plants, which is about 1/5 of all the known flowering plants in Australia. We have many unique granite outcrops. We've also got 480 kilometres of pretty much uninhabited coastline, just a few fishing camps out there. So We've also got our own time zone in our shire. So we jump about halfway across our shire, we jump 45 minutes. And that time zone is unique to our shire. Once you go over the border, you hit South Australian time. So we've got 2 time zones in our shire. So with all of that, you'd think that we probably, we've got the first impression thing nailed because we've got all that natural stuff. But humans, we've introduced humans. So humans are a bit of a blot on the landscape generally. So we have to work to put things in place to mitigate our effect. So we also are a mining town. So we're subject to the old boom and bust cycle. We are currently coming out of a bust. So we're just coming out of our sort of tide phase. So we have had some issues with some rundown properties. A lot of people left town, so places were abandoned. People started to have a bit of a whinge about everything looking a bit sad. So we have embarked on a program of improvement. So as part of that, we've got our visitor site development plan. So our vision for the future is that we've got a visitor site development plan, which is a work in progress at the moment, and it's aligned with our strategic community plan, and that is up for renewal this year. So we'll have a whole big rethink on how we're going to approach this, the way that we look. And we need to look good because we are, as Peter said, we are the first proper sort of town that people come to when they come across that Nullarbor and into along the air highway. So the basic premise of what we're trying to achieve is to identify our diverse community, increase the health and wellbeing in our shire, even through bushfires, drought, pandemics, all of those good things that we're all dealing with. And we want to be a connected community, which we largely can be because of our size. So there's not that many of us, so we kind of all know who we are and what we're all about. And we have, in the Shire, we have quite a small staff, which seems to be decreasing at the moment. But so we have to think outside the box about how we can achieve things without access to unlimited resources. So we come up with a few inventive little ideas about how we can make things happen that we need to get happening. And we've got our, so this was 100 years ago, and you may or may not notice that all of those people on the council there are gentlemen, and we've moved on from there. And so now we've got technology. That was one of our Zoom meetings in the midst of COVID. And most of our councillors now, with the exception of Councillor Hogan, we're all girls. So we've come pretty much full circle. We've got the highest percentage, I think, in Australia of female councillors, so 87% we run at. Yeah, so we're working towards continuous improvement. That slide is a slide of our overall slide of our town. That's the main road that goes, the main road there with the roundabout on it is the one that goes south, which is the way that that photo is pointing, towards Esperance, and back the other way is towards Kalgoorlie. And we're working towards continuous improvement. So we're pretty focused on keeping our woodlands look and feel. So we've invited lots of trees into town as well as people. And so we want to make sure that whatever we do, we make sure that our built environment lives up to our natural environment. So we want to keep our focus on that. And I will hand over to Pania, who will tell you the nuts and bolts of how we go about it.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'll say Yalanya to you, or welcome and nudju from the Shire of Dundas. Thank you to the President for acknowledging our First Nations across the Shire of Dundas country, and also I'd like to acknowledge your First Nations wherever it is that you work and live, recognising the richness that that culture brings to community. I'm Pania Turner. I'm not trying to be a school man, but I'm jumping from looking at the screen to looking at the largest screen, so I apologise for the downward look. I came to the Shire of Dundas in a community development role in 2015. Now that was a past council which kind of identifies how many years. I noticed in the chats earlier somebody highlighted that there is sometimes can be a long or a lengthy period of time that is a barrier for local government. But we need to understand that those chipping away, making small changes continuously will have a great impact to your community. So I came in 2015. My job was to do an audit of what was existing in community development space, and we soon realised that a team needed to address the aspirations of community, and that's what I'm going to speak about now. So for community development for us, it's kind of taking what's juicy, so the dreams and the aspirations, making it boring for some, operational, policy, planning, then making it juicy again, your outcome, your end result, the things that people first see and the things that people engage with. Lindsay, I'm just going to get you to play a little video that we have. Aware of time, I'm going to talk over some of that video, so I'll try and be clear. Guys, oh, we haven't started at the beginning, Lindsay, potentially. Uh-oh. Oh, you're back to us again. I'm going to introduce you to the Dundas dinos. So, our dinosaurs were introduced at a time where the Shire of Dundas, Norseman in particular, the state government announced during COVID that Norseman will become a quarantine station. Unfortunately, they forgot to notify local government that this was going to occur, so our community found that out during a press release. And then, of course, had some fear and trepidation about that and what that meant for our community and our town. To address that, we took something that's fun and not threatening and brought it into being able to address a serious message. And it really had really good high impact. Can I tell you that all these initiatives, they're not things like that. It was a mobile phone. Somebody's quite obsessed with dinosaur suits, and 2 staff members. No, yeah. And just an impromptu talking to our local business on the main street and asking if they participate to help share the message. It really was a success. And we need to remember that sometimes our first impressions are not only in infrastructure and landscaping and so forth, they're actually online and the way we communicate. So it's one of the things that I wanted to discuss and we're aware of in community development. And when you're looking to build your community development initiatives, how do you, I want you to reflect on how do you or your organisation, how do they listen? Are you defensive? Will you accept only certain feedback or feedback that aligns with your own truth? Are your ears attuned to certain frequencies? So is there particular voices that you hear and understand? And why is that the case? Where is there silence? You need to seek out the silent ones and understand why they are silent and what platforms you're offering to communicate. And then you need to have the courage to hear where it is that you're, where it is that you want to. Sorry, everyone, I'm just trying to flick to the next slide, Lindsay, if you could for us, please. Have the courage to take that feedback and hear it with honesty and be brave to hear it. So in front of you is what we're sharing now. This mural was commissioned by the West Australian artist Brenton C, and it sits on what used to be known as the old Camel Cafe. So this was an abandoned building that had sat abandoned on our main street, so that thoroughfare that President mentioned heading to Esperance. Broken windows, an eyesore right next to our community health centre, and council moved to purchase the building and address what it could be. They saw potential in what we had. The building is now fully refurbished, and this is only partway through the refurbishment, and is now a Woodlands Cultural Community and Visitor Centre, which offers a hub of tourism, arts and community services. But all of us working in community development, whether that is community builders as volunteers or community builders in your employment or within separate organisations, all of us know that, next slide, thanks Lindsay. All of us know that behind the good looks, there's a lot of work to go. So some of the essential things that we've learned to assist your community building is you have to have the right people in the right area. Review your team, review your volunteer team, review your community champions and their skill. Above all, I'm looking for mindset. What is the mindset? So skills can be developed. Personalities are harder to help shift and to grow to where you need them to be, to have that vision. It doesn't mean that these people are wrong or that they're bad. It might be that you're not letting them shine in the right space. Find the right space for them and they'll get on board with you, and you can try and understand where their strengths are. Positive first impressions are good. Lasting impressions are essential. So always at the beginning of a project, I'm thinking about what is the lasting impression that we're going to have. So they might be first impressions for people coming through your community and through your town. They will be lasting impressions for your community. It's something that we share with the community. It's something that we share with our local government, our council, our leadership and our staff members to help that progress. With community building, our team takes a bare feet, heels and steel cap boots approach. Bare feet, understand the environment that you're working in, do your research and then be prepared to unlearn what you've learnt during the process. The barefoot approach is that time that you walk barefoot on the sand. It's a quiet time. It's often at the beginning of the project. It's the sand between the toes, getting a feel for what is wanted, working with your community to understand their needs. Heels, that's for me. It could be for anyone else that chooses to wear heels in the office. It's the planning, it's the paperwork, it's the funding applications. Everything isn't always juicy, everything isn't always fun in community development, but it's essential. So getting that stuff done. And then steel cap boots approach. It's the on the ground, the construction, working with people, keeping an eye on progress and moving it forward. It's the working with your community champions, ready to pass on the project to them so that they can advertise through their love and passion for what you've developed together. And I'll finish off before I hand to Pete with the people. This image is about taken in the 2019-2020 bushfires in Norseman. At the time, we had the Salt Lakes surrounded by fire. We had ashfall on the town, and flames could be seen from the community. And before roads were closed. And we were isolated. All access points were closed. We felt a little bit left on our own, but community building, and so this is what's important, community building has at its core the people. It's always about the people. It's about standing beside your community in times of celebration and distress. It's about standing in front of your community to advocate for their rights and equitable access to opportunity and the right to thrive, the right for small communities to thrive. And sometimes it's those quieter but no less powerful moments of sitting with your community in places where no words are required. I put to you, the people in your community will give you the greatest impression of all. Yep. You want to click, Pete? You want to do your own clicking?
Thanks. My name is Peter Fitchat. I'm the CEO here. I've been CEO here now for 2.5 years. Really enjoying my job. And my role is to facilitate all that, what they described, and to be the supporting factor behind the scenes, to move, to look at legislation, and make this possible so people can rock up in our community, find a spot, have a look at it and enjoy it. So looking at our visitors coming into our community, when the community and councillors nominate to fund something, contributions, and it's then implemented, and having people come and enjoy what we created. So those challenges, and then put a bit of humour into it. So we sort of have a population reduction from 3,500 people in our whole Shire to 780. It's like any business. When you have that type of reduction, obviously money walks out the door and you have to do more with less. The expectation's still the same. And then having that ability to have a look at things, challenge governments, have a look at our funding opportunities, challenge legislation, and then build from that to what we currently have and what we continue to build on. And as the population, the boom and bust cycle that our president was talking about, to cope with that, we'd not necessarily want 3,500 people back, because in 15 years' time, they'll just leave again. So how are we going to deal with it? And how are we going to promote and still have that livability, have that financial support, and have that mining coming into our community with that contribution that can build capacity for those lean times once they've left our community again and we go through that bust period, that we're strong enough to be able to carry that and that implication. So all that has lent sort of opportunity for myself to work with elected members and our staff. They don't frown at me anymore when I tell them to get into a dino suit. When it first happened, I got big frowns and a lot of no-nos. Now it's not a problem anymore. But that building capacity, being able to work with elected members, being able to have that chat and then find that fine line to facilitate that growth. And I'm lucky. I've got quite a strong female representation in council. Our staff's a very strong female representation, and I guess I was lucky. I grew up with quite a strong mother. If you look at our facilities and our area, the track in the middle is our heritage trail. That used to be the old coach road. That was the road from Esperance to our Shire, and that used to bring people for mining activity back in the day, and it's still today one of our tourist drives. And I think that field, once you're on that track, there's a lot of stopover, there's old graves, there's this kind of abandoned mine sites. There's an old cricket pitch from Break a Day that's 125 years old. There's just little remnants of that left. So I think from a point of view of visiting, we haven't really marketed that, but it's with the new team I've got and my councillors, I think that's a increased priority to a point where we're achieving that, and that'll be ongoing. That's just a marvelous shot taken by one of our local photographers. At Jimbalana Range, the road coming in from the east, and that just sort of captured the woodlands, the salt lakes, and our granite outcrops, and it's a phenomenal place and a fantastic opportunity to be part of building this to a point where I guess we've got all the tools to make us the destination that it deserves to be. We're more than mining, so once this PowerPoint gets shared, I think there's opportunity for everybody to go to those links, click on them, get to know us as a Shire, introduce yourself, contact us, and we can tell you more about what we're all about. And I think from a point of view of being central, being the first big community coming into WA, I think we sort of have a spot where we can provide whatever the adventurer is looking for. I guess from That's
Okay, there she
you go.
is.
Oh, look, Laurene, Peter and Pania, just such a great presentation. And I can see a lot of the comments on the side here in the chat, just how blown away they are by the energy or the juiciness, as you say, of your approach to community engagement. And it's so interesting that we saw a lot of the principles Peter spoke about early on in the first half of our webinar today around humour and energy and colour and the feel of your community. And so much of that underpins your approach to what you're doing. Thank you for inspiring us all today. I've just kind of opened up on the side here to ask for any last minute questions. And there has been a question that's come through from Susie. And Susie would like to know, has COVID affected the town and the visitors? And also, while you're at it, how do you handle naysayers? That's a common one.
So I think from the community point of view, we'll all three have a quick go. Pania will go to the community side.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a reduction in business being right on the state border. So we had a lot of tourism traffic. Naysayers, absolutely hear feedback. Take it on. And one of the first things I say is when we're doing consultation or when I'm learning something new, I might tread on your toes. Let me know. Yeah, you're welcome to tread on my toes. How can we learn together if we don't listen? You just move forward, chipping away, doing what you need to do.
Yeah, COVID definitely has had a bit of an impact. We've had a sort of semi-hard kind of controlled border, which stopped everyone coming across. So our businesses out on the highway definitely way impacted. Some of them have lost over 90% of their business, so that's never a good thing. Naysayers, I mean, we just got to deal with that. So we're probably just starting to emerge from that a little bit. So hopefully that will continue. Naysayers, I think, bring them with you. If they want to be naysayers, that's fine, but invite them to give some opinion on how they think we can do it better or what ideas they have. If they just want to be flat out, say no and not offer anything, well, I guess you have to move on. So, yeah.
I think the dinosaurs are an apt metaphor in some of those circumstances. Probably a good last question for you has just come through from Christine saying, what's your advice to councils who also have a very small rate base?
So from that point of view, it's sort of the challenge with that is to be very careful, to approach everything with a business mind. I don't want to brag, but my team and with my elected members last financial year, out of a $5.5 million budget, which is really small, we managed to pay off $1.6 million off our deficit. We've accepted the challenge. We revisited everything we do, and it's taken a real strong approach from staff, elected members. Anything from printing to staplers, buying fuel, tendering. We've come under budget with every single project we've touched since 2.5 years ago, thanks to my elected members allowing us to play the way we do, make the changes we do, and present that in a manner that's acceptable to all the standards, regulations that guides us.
That's great advice, and I think we'd all like to congratulate your team on how you work and collaborate with all of your different ideas and different energies and the ways that you approach your community development. You're three great examples of community builders, and I have a bit of a tradition here where we ask the attendees to jump on, and Chris has already started, and grab the emoji that's a little clap, because we're not in a conference room, so we can't actually clap for you, but hopefully you'll virtually hear the applause that's coming through now and the waves and the hearts and things. So we just want to recognise the brilliant work you're doing in Norseman and beyond, and thank you all so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I've got a little message from Rural Aid to share before we close off today, and I promise I won't keep you long, but as many of you will be aware in regional areas, in particular if you are a primary producer, you'll be very aware, we've seen some improved conditions occur across most of Australia. And I realise there are certainly some pockets of central and northern Queensland that are still very much affected by drought, as are others. But if you're in those areas that are seeing improved seasonal conditions, this is actually the time we want you to register as a primary producer with Rural Aid. And that's because it's easy to do when you're not dealing with the stress of being impacted by drought and flood and various other challenges. And in the middle of a crisis, it feels like an impossible task to do these sorts of things. But if you do it now, this is when we can put you in the system so that should you ever require fodder, water, financial assistance, counsellors, or any of the myriad of services that Rural Aid offer, then we can reach out to you because you'll be on the system and you can say yes, no, maybe to whatever is on offer there. I also want to invite you all to next week's session. We have got a wonderful series of case studies for next week. So we want to talk about reinvention of small towns. That's a theme for this entire series. But next week, our focus is on Indigenous culture and heritage. How do you amplify it in your community and bring people in that want to engage with the Indigenous culture and heritage that you have as part of your region? We're going to be hearing from speakers from Mount Magnet in Western Australia and also from other communities around that area, with Peter Kenyon, of course, hosting a wonderful introduction with lots of examples. Now, Rural Aid are a very vast and diverse organisation, and I didn't really realise that until I came on board. I thought they did buyer bail and drought support, and that was it. That is wrong. They do about 1,000 activities for communities, for individuals, for farmers, for kids. And there's a very easy way you can help them. If you need to buy presents for someone, or honey, or you want to buy new glasses or fresh produce if you live in a city in Australia, if you want to buy pasta or juice or skincare or a whole range of other things, water or cargo pants, or even if you're getting married this year, and there are so many organisations that support Rural Aid. They're all on the website. And if you just hit the sponsors tab, you can find out there that by investing with those businesses or buying through those businesses, you will in fact be working with Rural Aid. Thank you all so much for your attendance today. I think it's been a great start to our series. And thanks for your engagement on the chat as well. It's great to feel that we're actually connecting as community builders. We look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week. Stay safe. Stay well, and we'll see you then.